So I guess we'll go over some of the real kind of big, basic milestones, because if I just gave your bio, that would probably be 3 hours right there if we got into depth.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry to get to, and I'm already interrupting, but real quick, very, very quick. This was a very interesting week for all of us. I just basically want to say you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem.
Real talk.
Okay? You can be an obstructionist, and we know what obstructionists are like. We saw it for 8 years, okay? But if you plan on being an obstructionist, you're drinking your own poison, hoping the opposition dies. It's not the way, for me, it's not the way to go, okay? That doesn't mean you don't protest, okay? They gotta know where the fuck we're coming from, all right? You gotta be vigilant, and you gotta protest, all right? But you don't obstruct, okay? You start a dialogue, okay? And I don't mean starting a dialogue with the guy who's sitting next to you or the girl who's sitting over there, okay? They all agree with you. You start a dialogue with people you don't agree with, okay? And you listen to their point of view, and you give them your point of view. And either one of you two is going to convert, or at least start to understand the divide in this country. That's it.
Thank you.
But enough about me. Let's talk about me.
I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense. So, if you're talking music in Philadelphia and nationwide, but Philly, you can't really do it in the 80s, 90s, 2000s without talking about Joe the Butcher Nickio. He started Studio 4 studio in the early 80s, eventually moving that into downtown to kind of, we were talking about that before, to make it more easier to get to, so more people could even kind of have access to working with you guys. In the latest 80s, I think 89, you formed Rough House Records. So I brought my stack of wax here. Some things. Whoa.
Oh, that was a good one. One of the best.
That was like, oh my goodness.
So, just
Another good
see
one.
these.
Could you tell how many each one's sold to date?
That would be,
Oh boy. Okay. 15 million. 5.5 million. I don't know, 2.5, 3 million, maybe more at this point. It's been so long.
Cypress Hill.
The first Cypress Hill. Oh shit, man.
Halfway through, we're gonna have him turn his pants around.
A lot. This is one of the top 40 biggest records of all time, still. It's totally crossed out. I wore my clothes backwards for Halloween this year.
That's early on.
This is the first Grammy I was ever involved with, Rock the House. I know this song is well over 1 million, but this record is what put Joe the Butcher on the map, is Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, for sure.
This one you can't see as well, but you heard this guy Nas. So that's Halftime.
Yeah, Nas was originally signed to Rough House. We did a record called Halftime, which was on the soundtrack of this movie Zebrahead. And the rest is history, of course, with Nas.
And that one, of course, has the Butcher mix.
Yes.
Which a lot of people forget about, but on Halftime, one of the two mixes, and my favorite is the Butcher mix. So.
Thank you.
Um,
The original Gangsta. Schoolie D Saturday Night. I don't think this probably sold more than a couple 100,000 copies, but there are more people who look at me and they don't go, "You produced Billy Joel." They go, "Didn't you do Schoolie D?" So, this is a great record for me. Really, this is one of the early ones.
And I have a bunch of other just kind of one-offs. We were talking about Jewel T. in
That's the
Philly
first.
side.
That's the first record that me and my partner Chris Schwartz, who started Rough House. This is the first record we ever put out. It was a record by Jewel T called "Believe It or Not," and it was actually pretty good.
I love that record. And I think so. So the thing to just kind of note in the background here is that with the Jewel T, kind of you have to start somewhere, and sometimes it's not always great when you start. That was a great record to start with. So how it's, and we're going to talk a lot about this in the next hour or two about incremental, kind of going the next steps up the ladder and kind of diversifying what you're doing, bringing different people into the fold, different artists, different studios and opportunities. So one of my Cash Money and Marbles.
The two great DJs of this era was Cash Money and Jeff, Jazzy Jeff. And I had the pleasure of making both their records. And it was funny because Cash Money was definitely he was just a better DJ cutter, okay, in terms of his proficiency. But Jeff had better feel. So it depended on whether you liked the technical aspect or whether you liked the feel aspect as to whether you thought in a battle who was better, you know, Jeff or Cash.
Butcher Breaks and Beats.
That
This
was,
one since 1988.
Yeah,
This was his own.
I got signed to Atlantic as a beats and breaks kind of guy, and this is it. This is it.
That's a damn good record.
Well, the dope beat is pretty good.
There you go.
Dope.
Is that your favorite?
Yeah, I don't know. I forget. The stupid beat.
Stupid beat.
Stupid beat.
Hey, those were the 80s, man. That's how we talk.
Yeah, dope.
Okay, so basically I wanted to just go over that a little bit, just to show from a purely technical musical, you know, mixing, engineering, producing. But Rough House Records, you were the owner. And so this yet again is kind of talking about having your own studio, kind of learning the business as you went along, originally being kind of more peripherally part of it, really part of it, but not kind of engineering can be a very behind the scenes kind of lonely type of thing, I suppose, or maybe not lonely, you always have people around, but.
Sure. What I discovered, I owned Studio 4 from 1980 with two other partners. Interesting story. It's like, how did a 33-year-old white guy from the suburbs get into rap? Okay, I mean, it's like, well, of course I loved music up to them. I loved Stevie Wonder, I loved Marvin Gaye, and it's like, well, but how'd you get into rap? And what happened was, I had two or three other partners, and we had this chief engineer who had some credits to his name, and he decided Joe just doesn't have it. He's not a good engineer. He just doesn't have it. So they wanted to buy me out, and I was devastated. This is all I ever wanted to do. I'm like, come on, I'll show my worth. I'm a good engineer. Let me stay. So in the early 80s, well, the type of music that nobody else wanted to do was rap music. So I owe them a debt of gratitude, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have started working with Lawrence Goodman and, you know, and Jeff and Cash Money and 3 Times Dope and Schoolie and all those guys. Because, you know, I learned from the best in terms of like what real hip hop was. It was a great schooling, and I just found that I just love this. I love this shit, man. This is great. Great music is great music. It doesn't matter if you love opera, if you like country, if you like rap. Great music is great music, you know. So
let's talk a little bit then, I guess, while we're in that zone talking about Studio 4. At what point, first of all, I guess, because at that era, early 80s, there were definitely plenty of people in Philly and New York and the world that were kind of like, okay, this is a fad, and we'll kind of see how this goes, and we'll move on to something else next, and et cetera. So, like, at what point did you start to realize, I mean, I think always the best way is by being in the studio with the talent that you were working with. You're like, this is real. This is not kind of a gimmick, this is not something like that. So at what point did you kind of, and did you think it was maybe a fad at first, and not necessarily even putting any good or bad to that being a fad, but when was it like, this
When
is
did it,
really,
when it become
this is really catching?
legitimate?
Yeah.
Like when it become real? I don't really know if I ever had much of an opinion as to whether or not I thought it was going to be big. I just love being part of a genre of music where you could break rules and you could do shit that other people weren't doing.
Yeah.
You know, but I think what led me to believe that there was something there is when Schoolie and Jeff and Three Times Dope and Steady B, all those acts got signed to Jive Records, which, so it's like, well, this is the big time. You know, it's like, so these guys believe that this stuff can sell. Obviously it did.
Yeah.
That's when, you know, I also realized is like, this genre is here to stay, and you let the public speak. Do they like it? Don't they like it?
Yeah.
And obviously, they liked it.
I mean, so what other kind of things were going on at Studio 4 that you said when a rap record would come in, they'd say, oh, give it to Jeff. So what other kind of stuff was being done there? Was there kind of rock and new wave and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as far as new wave, we had this band Executive Slacks that became pretty big. At the exact same time, my brother was doing this band, the Hooters, who you may have heard. They
Big Philly.
many, you know.
They're
Oh,
on our wall.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah, our wall thing over there.
And
Okay,
the wallpaper thing?
It's funny because the first two platinum records that happened out of Studio 4 happened within months of each other, and it was Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and it was the Hooters. So it was really funny how it's just like, wow, man, Studio 4 is getting put on the map in both genres.
Yeah.
Then there was Robert Hazard, there was Tommy Conwell and the Young Rumblers, there was this band Pretty Poison, the Vells. So it was a great time to be at Studio 4 because we were firing on all cylinders. In the R&B world, I don't know if you guys remember Fat Larry's band. They had a song called Zoom that was big. We were on the tail end of the Philly International stuff, so a lot of the great musicians, Bobby Eli and Norman Harris, we did a lot of their solo projects. So it was a great time. What I realized though at that point was, and I owned Studio 4 at that point with two other partners, but it's just kind of like, we were doing okay, we were booking time, we were providing the service, okay, but it's like, is owning Studio 4 going to put my kids through college? I mean, is this going to buy me a house at the beach? And it's like, I don't think so. What I got to own a piece of these acts. If that's where the money is, and that's when me and Chris Schwartz decided in '86. Chris was managing Schoolie D at the time, and I was making Schoolie's records. So it's just like Chris could sell ice cream to the Eskimos, and we were selling to Funko Mart and the House of Market and the Rack Jobbers called from Richmond. So it's like, well, you've got that side down, I've got the production side down. Let's form a record company, and that's when we formed Rough House.
Was part of the Rough House, was it almost like a response to Jive kind of taking a lot of the Philly guy? I mean, because Jive did have a Philly fetish.
Yeah, I mean, it's
they
just
really
like,
did. They started.
Yeah, it's like, fuck this, man. We want some of this shit.
I mean, was that
seriously? I mean, like,
because that couldn't have been fun to see.
No, it's just like it was all going to them.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Okay. But I
and
mean, what were the other? Was that always the first option to do something like Rough House? Is that always? When did that idea start? Because I guess that clearly you were crucial to all these records being made, and then they would kind of fly away because you would, as soon as you're done with them, then you go on to the next session and they go on to the charts.
Correct. So at that point, it's just like I wanted to strike while the iron was hot. And it's just like you get your name on the back of all these records. That's when we went to Capitol Enigma. And Enigma had this band Poison, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, and this band Striper. Anyway, so our first distribution deal was with Capitol, and that was in 1986. That went through 1989. We did Mac Money. We did this band called Blackmail. We did Robbie B and DJ Jazz. Rock the Go. Was that Rock the Go Go?
Probably being Jazzy J.
No, it was DJ Robbie B. Anyway, so we did some records with them.
As Rough House?
As Rough House.
So Rough House existed as early as '86?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then in 1980, it was around 1989. We were still making records with the Hooters at Studio 4, and the guy who produced the Hooters also produced Cyndi Lauper, and that was like uber huge record. And his name was Rick Chertoff, and Rick was he was going to become head of A&R at Columbia Records. So we were not happy with Capitol, and he said, "Why don't you guys come over to Columbia with me?" And the first two things he signed was Rough House and this band, Alice in Chains.
Mm-hmm.
They were the first two acts that got signed under Rick.
Good years.
Yeah. And that was '89. And our first record was a record called The Piper by Chiba, which, if you can find, it's a pretty cool record. It was a pretty cool record called The Piper. And then we had a Philly act, Larry Larr.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until, I guess, 91, we had our first big charting rap record, which was Tim Dog, Fuck Compton. And it was half rap, half professional wrestling.
But it's literally just the album turned 25, I think, yesterday or 2 days
Really?
ago.
That was
Tim Dog here now?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm from the South Bronx. Fuck Compton. Oh my
Tim was not
God.
shot. He was not
You
shot.
got it. Yeah. Well, we're doing we're doing this digital streaming anniversary for Rough House that I'm setting up with Sony, because so many of these, you can't get Tim Dog, you can't get the Goats. There's so many projects. Call the Wild, Psycho Realm. There's all these records that you guys, that you haven't experienced, that we have to get it streaming to people, because they're obviously important records to me, but some of this shit's really good,
So early on, I guess, let's talk about through maybe '87. What were some of the biggest business learnings that you had that kind of got you to the point? Because the other thing I guess I want to talk about is, because earlier today I was talking about the importance of kind of ownership, of your own work. And as a label owner, that's a little different. I mean, I think you're unique in many ways in that you were also part of the process of making these records, not just kind of in your ivory tower and, the money guy kind of thing. So, so what did you learn most about running a studio, about how the music industry worked, and then how you could kind of improve upon that, or at least do it in your own way to make that, make Rough House a different kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, what made it first and foremost, it came with the content of these records. It made everything else for Rough House and me that much easier. So it's like it's hard to say what in the minutia of like what made Rough House successful. It was the artists that we signed,
Mm-hmm.
and it was identifying what made an artist different, and whether you're selling a pair of Vans, or if you're selling food, or if you're selling a rap record. It's just kind of like the world already has a Beyonce. The world already has a fill in the blank. What is it about whatever it is that you're selling that makes it unique? Where's the market for it? If whatever it is, if you go, I don't even know. It's like, why doesn't somebody blah blah blah? And it can be so simple, but it's just kind of like the world doesn't need another company to make water, But whatever it is to isolate what makes whatever it is unique.
Was
You
there a
know-
Rough House aesthetic? Or was it just that it was kind of more, it was good quality and it was all unique, but there wasn't a certain,
Yeah.
clearly certain labels have aesthetics, you know, like that's super raw or this stuff's all from LA. But you guys weren't, you were all over the place.
No, we were all over the place. I mean, Tim Dog was from New York. The Fugees, of course, were from Jersey.
Yeah.
Cypress Hill was from L.A. Criss Cross and Jermaine Dupri was from Atlanta.
Yeah.
It was just when I hit the play button, did it change my life as I know it? Because it's so much easier to say no than it is to say yes.
Yeah.
And Rick Chertoff did say something interesting to me. He said, when you listen to something, all right, if you are willing to take out a second mortgage, honest to God, if you're willing to take out a second mortgage on your house to put this out yourself, then you should do it. Whether it's an interesting idea, whether, you know, it's, if you have to be passionate about what we do. And let's face it, man, even today, making it in the music business isn't difficult. It's fucking impossible. Okay? Now, having said that, okay, but you know what I mean by that, okay? You have to stick with it, man. It's just like if you're not willing to stick with it, obviously. And I think this is kind of preaching to the choir, it's just like things you already know, but it's, you know, it's like sticking with it, but sticking with the right idea. And that can be really challenging, you know, because you always hear people say, you know, don't give up, but if you suck at what that is, okay, you waste 10 years of your life because you had all these fucking people saying, don't give up. Okay, don't give up on your passion. What are you good at? You're not good at that, whatever that is, okay? What are you good at? People have some sort of concept. See, I don't get excited about it. Okay.
That's the beauty of it, man.
Yeah, well, really, I mean, it's like, it's being passionate. What are you good at? Okay? Okay, let's just say being a rapper. You want to be a rapper. And let's just use that as an example. But you're not that good at being a rapper. But maybe you're good at social media. Maybe you're good at recording that rapper. Maybe you're good at managing that rapper's money. Okay? Expand what it is you love, but not just, I'm going to be a rapper. I'm going to be a rapper. It's like, no, you're not. Okay? No, you're not. And if, you know, it's like if you're white hot, and I mean like heat, not white. But but you know, if you are passionate and you put everything into it, and you're going on 2 to 3 years, and you're seeing no advance, sit back for a second and go, okay, like I said, you may not want to be a rapper, but you can be in the music business, or manage a rapper's money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like you got to, you know, you have to be realistic about, you know, manage your expectations.
One thing that you were involved with that I think is really important, and one of the more interesting stories I've covered in my books, was the Fugees.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Because yes, I'm sure you do remember. Their first, does anyone remember their first record before the score?
I know the name of it.
London on Reality, right?
Yes, London on Reality.
How did that do?
That record did not do well at all.
Oh.
That record, it's at the very, very, very end of that record. We started seeing a little bit of action. There was a song on that record called Vocab. And we did some remixes on it. And it started to bubble up just a little. And back then, it sold 119,000 copies in its run. Today, that's a thrilling success. Okay,
That's true.
But back then, it only sold 119,000 copies. And
Well, let me just tell you, so what and then I want you to
Sure.
expand on it times 10, but what they told me when I spoke with them was that after that's a non-success, you know, Clearly, the score, if you listen to it sonically, it sounds completely different, their vocal style. Like, there was a really interesting thing that I think it must have been Wyclef told me, that they were working with Salam Remy, and he was yelling. It was kind of like on like an Onyx type thing. Like, they were very aggressive, and they were kind of yelling and angry and stuff. And Salam Remy said, the mic is right in front of you. Like, why are you yelling? Like, we can hear you. We're fine. We got you. And then all of a sudden, like, a light bulb went off, and he's like, oh, I guess I can kind of tone it down a little, and I can kind of, you know, not talk, but I don't have to yell like this. And then it was like, bam, and then kind of, I mean, there are other aspects of the score that were different. They recorded it in their basement, in their uncle's or nephew basement, Booga basement. But the other thing they told me that was hugely important is they were developed. They were given a second chance, and that doesn't happen that often, especially in that era, because those were not good sales in that era, and you guys could have easily dropped them. So why did you not drop them?
Well, to your point, it sold 119,000 copies. And Sony said to me, you're not going to pick up the Fugees, right? You're not going to do another record on them? And I'm like, put down the glue, okay? To me, it was like, what? The record just started to happen. Look, we got on the actual pop charts at the end of the record. So it was just like, well, hell yeah, we're going to make another Fuji record. And the reason why we could is because Rough House as a label was cross-collateralized, which basically means if I made a ton of money with Criss Cross and with Cypress Hill, they owed me a lot of money. So I'm spending my own money, okay? So it's just like, well, fine, if you want to make another Fugees record, we'll just take it off the, you know, take it off the black, on the black side, you know? So, and there was no doubt in my mind I wanted to make another Fuji record. I mean, it happened to be just a, you know.
Do you think that had anything to do with the fact that you were an engineer and kind of had the ears versus if an accountant was running the label, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It was all from that standpoint of feeling like these guys are they're just getting into their own. We got to see what happens.
But you still couldn't have known that the score would do what it did.
Oh my God, no, I didn't. I mean, just even with Criss Cross, for example, it's just like that was supposed to be an EP. Jermaine was 16 years old. The kids were 12. Jermaine was 16. I couldn't drive. Okay, and yeah, and so we made this EP, and there's like Little Boys in the Hood, blah blah blah, and they was like, well, let's turn it into an album. The last two songs we did were like Jump and Warm It Up, Chris, and we never even. It was just like, yeah, let's make it a whole album. It's like, yeah, this shit's cool. So like, what? You know, it's funny. And another point about the score was when I first heard they were Killing Me Softly was coming together, right? And this goes to show you how you have to listen to the artist and what the artist has to say. I thought the record was amazing. Okay, you've got just Lauren, you got the beat, bass comes in on the first chorus, and then everything drops out, and it's just Lauren and the beat in the second verse. And I said to Clef, the song's kind of dropping off. It's dying there. You got to keep the beat in. I mean, you got to keep the bass in, or introduce another element. It's just way too. It's just like it's kind of. Yeah, the energy kind of dies.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of like, nope, no, man. Listen to Lauren's vocals, man. It's like, by having nothing there, everybody's listening to her vocal, which was unfucking believable.
Yes.
You know? And it was just kind of like, I was like, I don't think so, man. He's like, nah, man, it's got to stay that way. And it stayed that way. You
Okay,
know, so.
that's interesting, because I mean, and also I think too, the relationship between, and this can obviously be extrapolated to other, venues and not just music, but trust between collaborators and kind of, you're a musician too, right?
Yeah.
So you as a musician and Clef as a musician kind of talking to each other and you being just like, okay, I think like he seems really sure of himself about this, I assume, and saying, I'm kind of sure of myself, but I guess also what did you have to lose, right? Because it's not like there were huge expectations for the
Exactly.
next Fuji's record.
Yeah, there's different expectations when you've had a huge record and now you're going in and everybody's waiting for it.
That was, so I did another chapter on like the Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. And they were basically Capitol, according to them, Capitol was just like, I don't really care if you guys put out another record or not. And they actually did the same thing, where they bought their own equipment, kind of started their own studio, and just disappeared for like a year or two. And when you kind of create, obviously the Beastie Boys had seen a ridiculous amount of success and kind of had gone up and down, but when you can kind of create in an atmosphere like that where you don't have anything major to lose, I mean, I guess you have your career, but you're also kind of confident in yourself that it's like, I think we're on to something here.
Yeah.
So when the score was finished then, do you remember what song, like, did you know Killing Me Softly was going to be the one that kind of really drove it?
Even everyone at Sony was just kind of like, well, I mean, that was one undeniable,
Yeah.
song
Okay.
that was, and same with, I mean, Ready or Not more also, but Killing Me Softly was like,
I mean, that was just beyond,
Yeah.
that was ridiculous.
and of course Enya sued us for Ready or Not.
Did she really?
The Enya Sam, whatever. I've been sued.
You don't want to talk about that.
Nah,
Those-
yeah, I've been
those
sued
fun
enough times in my life.
Well, so what though, like say in the 80s then, before Rough House, what did you go into Rough House, how were you equipped to succeed with Rough House? Like, and were you sure, not, you never know for sure, but what was you kind of going into, what was your mindset?
I guess getting back to the not just wanting to be a studio owner, and with each successive with each success, whether with these major labels, it was like I knew what my lane was, and that was making these records and picking, like being a good A&R guy and picking the right act that was going to take off. Fortunately for me, I had the Sony machine as infrastructure, which was a great learning experience.
Yeah. And what was the kind of the division of labor between you and Chris then? Was one of you stronger at certain aspects? I mean, obviously you had
quite the opposite. It was like he never bothered me on the production side. I never bothered him on the promotion side. Although we obviously had to agree, and it was a good marriage that way, because it'd be like you'd play something, and he was not involved because when you're in the trenches, you get so emotionally involved.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, I think, whatever, I think the vocals could be better, and you're like, what? Vocals? And then, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the same thing with me, it was great learning how to promote a record from the Sony aspect
that must have been a whole new.
was critical.
What are you saying, Mimi?
So this is incredible, but unfortunately, I think we're running a little bit out of time, and we only have 10 minutes left, and I'd love to open this up as a Q&A.
Oh, please.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
please.
I'll talk forever.
Go ahead.
So, well, two questions. I can ask you the second one after. But the one question I have is, so since you've worked with a lot of different types of genres and artists like Billy Joel, things like that, were there any experiences that you had outside of hip hop that you were able to translate into being an engineer or working with hip hop artists that might have influenced their sound too?
I mean, just, I guess, from the standpoint of working with different types of people, and, it teaches you patience. I mean, you have to be a psychologist, you've got to, you have to be a producer, you have to be a psychoanalyst. So, just from the standpoint of working with different types of people, but it's like, it's amazing how similar all musicians and music people, talented music people, they're all pretty much genius, imbecile, and whatever.
Wild card.
Yeah, wild card, yeah. So, but, any, go ahead.
So, like, from up to the point where you just stopped talking, what produced, like, so you just own the studio? Like, did you, like, produce those records, or, like, you was just the engineer behind it?
Up to then, I was
Like,
just,
mixing and mastering?
Yeah, I was just the engineer behind it, and being part of the studio owner, I mean, I got paid studio time, whatever it was, $70 an hour or whatever, and that just went to the studio, and I worked as an engineer at the studio that I owned.
Okay. Now, I was just wondering, because like you said that you didn't really own any of the records, so, I wasn't really clear if you was producing them or not with the split sheets, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I was wondering.
Yeah. So then I, as becoming owner of Rough House, then I owned a piece of those, of those records.
So,
Introduce yourself and be memorable.
oh, I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Kenny. Be memorable. I'm an artist and a producer, so thank you for that honesty about rap, because I think about stuff like that all the time. But my question for you is, so coming from a time where the studio was like the only place you could go to make music, to today's time where it's like people like myself like have like bedroom studios. I'm interested to hear your perspective on how the paradigm of recording has changed from like you could only go here to you can record anywhere now.
It's wonderful. If you look, my son really did most of this record, this OCD, Moosh and Twist, which just came out this year. If you look at where it was recorded at Joe's Garage, which is my garage. Joe's Garage. So, but it's wonderful for people now, because at one time you just had to go to a studio. Now, Lil Uzi's record was made in his bedroom. You know what I mean? So, and it's all what's up here, and what's here, the rest.
What about sonically, though, when you listen to, say, something that was recorded in someone's bedroom, your ears are obviously a lot more sensitive than mine would be. So do you kind of sometimes listen and say, I wish I could have got my hands on that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I definitely, I can't say I don't, but again, I'm an old head who that's important to me, but I have to realize what's important to the record, to the genre, and to the artist.
Okay.
I think that.
My name is Tony. I'm a filmmaker. All of us in here are aspiring to be entrepreneurs in our each respective fields. What advice you could give us all about longevity? You've been around in the music industry for decades now. Like, how do you think you accumulated so much success over the course of the years?
And also, Joe's done a lot of work with film too.
I got out of the music business for about 10 years, and I made a couple of movies. I made a movie called Shade with Jamie Foxx and Sylvester Stallone, and made a movie with Michael Keaton.
And this is as a producer, executive producer?
Executive producer. The movie world, okay, it's like when you produce a record, you're actively in the creative aspect of producing a record. When you produce a movie, you're the foreman on a skyscraper where every day something is going wrong. There's no creativity with producing a movie. If you're the editor, if you're the director, obviously if you're an actor, but never lose your passion. I'm getting hoarse because I still love this shit, man. I love it. I'm still passionate about it.
Do you think part of the passion is also because you have diversified and you haven't just done the same thing the whole time, and you've kind of swerved a little but always had the passion?
The last 2 years, there's Kenny Green, he's a Philly rapper who I really, really like, and OCD. The other 2 or 3 or 4 acts that I've produced in the last couple of years were not rap. It was a blues act, a rock, it was just different styles of music.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is like, my email address is joenicolomusic@gmail.com. If you're an aspiring rapper, or if you have, especially from a music standpoint, a lot of people will be like, Joe ain't gonna mix my shit, man. I don't have that kind of money. I don't, it's like, I'm not even gonna call him. It's like, don't necessarily think that way, okay? It's just like, I love giving back. Now, if I can work it into my schedule, if it makes sense, we'll make it work. If I can't, I'll just say, I wish I could. Or if I listen to it and it's like, you should be doing something else. And a very respectful way, you know, I will gently say, you know, but,
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We talked about that earlier, because I think that's one lesson here in that it never hurts to ask, you know, like never be afraid, even if something seems crazy, like it never, like Joe was saying, you might think, like, he's not gonna mess with me, but you don't know until you ask.
Until you ask.
Right, so, yeah.
You talked a lot about kind of trend spotting and being able to sort of see the future in that way. And a lot of folks have kind of talked to us about that, even just this weekend alone. So do you think trend spotting, seeing the future, is something that some people can just do? Or is it something that you can build your skills at and learn how to be a trend spotter?
That's a great question.
yeah, that is a good question.
My name is Chantel, by the way.
Wow, it's a little bit, it's more difficult when you're talking about an occupation that requires a certain amount of God-given talent. But having said that, I think it's definitely possible. I mean, it's just like, it depends on how devoted you are to your craft, how willing you are to listen, to take constructive criticism. I mean, like, I went through this whole thing about, you know, and I don't want to discourage anyone is from the standpoint where, you know, if you're not getting anywhere, some people are way too impatient. You know, we live in an instant society, and people aren't willing to pay their dues, and they're not willing to put in the time. So I don't know if that answered your question, but the answer is
I have a follow-up. Do you know any people who you feel did get better at A&R and did get better over time? Like Ahmet Ertegun, clearly from the get-go, from Atlantic Records, knew. Some people just have it, but I think that's a really interesting question. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
And it's not even prognostication, because like you can say this is an incredible artist, but then they might flop. You know?
Sure.
So how do you know artistry versus what the public wants at the right exact time? Because Criss Cross, you know, that was
Sure.
a special time when that hit.
I think yeah. I'm just like if you're a good starting quarterback, and the Eagles were winning 10-9. I don't know what the score is right now, but they were 10-9. Pardon?
15-20.
Well, we'll talk about something. No. No, it's like good people with inherent skills, as they take in information and they learn, they get better.
Okay.
You know.
Elizabeth?
We're talking about intuition. I don't know what Chantel means, but what Tony asked about, like creative intuition, concepting intuition, trend intuition. What about your fiscal intuition and your spending money, making money? Like, describe what that is for you and what that feels like when you're making choices where to spend money on projects and where to, you know, and how you, what, maybe the list of the steps you take or just the feelings you get when you know when it's worth throwing in a lot of money or holding back.
Mortgaging the house?
Yeah, well, the mortgage. I mean, again, because this business is so subjective. It really does come down to a gut passion feel that you have, and that pretty much determines how much money you want to spend on a project. But you have to be aware that if it's just not moving in some sort of incremental move, it has to be moving forward some way, shape, or form. And I think, and social media is a wonderful barometer for us in this business. I was just up at Universal on Thursday, and it's kind of taken that guesswork out of who gets money and who doesn't. And it's elevated itself to where they're not even just looking at Instagram now or YouTube or Facebook. They look at Spotify, because Spotify is actual streaming sales. So it's kind of taken the guesswork out of it, but it's also kind of taken the passion.
Yeah. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken then, monetarily?
I,
And did it pay off?
I spent $2.5 million on this movie Shade, and that was 13 years ago. And it's funny because this year the rights of the movie revert back to me, and I was, I'll be honest, I was about $250,000 unrecouped with that movie. But now with streaming, with Stallone where he is now, with Jamie Foxx where he is now, I can resell that movie,
Yeah.
and I am definitely going to be in the black. But it
Okay.
took 13 years for me to get into the black with
And
that.
did you think it would take less, a lot less?
I
Or-
thought it definitely would take. Yeah, I thought for sure that you know when the movie was coming out,
Yeah.
that it would have recouped way before that.
Okay, Megan?
So my question is, and I'm not assuming anything, but I always assume the common denominator. Can you describe what in the black means?
What? I'm sorry.
In the term in the black.
In the black.
Being profitable. When you're in the red, you're not profitable. When you're in the black, you're profitable.
What about, what are the biggest differences between film and music in this in like 2016 in the way that certain like streaming options are there? You obviously have things that are being made to be binged, you know, that are 12 episode band. Like what have you noticed? Because you're involved with both.
Yeah, well, the opportunity for making smaller amounts of money are much bigger today, both in music and in film. And you know, just streaming rights, the world. When I first made Shade, there was no China, there was no Russia. They're going to be my biggest markets. They've never seen them. They've never gotten the movie. So the world has become a lot smaller and a lot more accessible because of this stuff. So that aspect. But big money on a movie is such a tremendous risk because there are so many elements that have got to come together. You can create music from nothing.
Yeah.
You can create something from nothing. Where with a movie, everything has to come together. The story has to come together. The actors have to come together. There has to be some sort of chemistry between the acting, between the directing, between the way the story goes, between the way it's edited. So
Doesn't some of that though overlap with music though? It sounds like
yeah,
it's
but
more
but
complicated
It's
with-
much it's just a lot more complicated. Sure, all that stuff has to happen in making a great record.
Sure.
It's just sometimes I'm amazed that as many movies get made or become a cohesive thing. When that's why, of course, when you spend $220 million on a movie, well,
you're gonna probably see it through.
you better. You're gonna try to do your best.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna do two more questions. You and then you.
Hi, I'm Kyrie. So you paraphrased a conversation you had with the higher-ups at Sony. And I'm curious, how long does that conversation usually last? Like, do they start talking to you in January about the album, then by December they say, hey, it's time to go? And also, as an artist, if you don't have someone who's taking responsibility for you like you did for the Fugees, what should they be looking for? What should they be saying to higher-ups at Sony to make sure they can continue their legacy?
That's a good question. I see a lot of that through rose-colored glasses because we continue to have so much success that they never bothered us. It was just it's and that's how it works. I mean, it's just like if you're making them a lot of money, they're like, yeah, when do you want to put it out? Or so.
But what do you notice from other people who don't have your resume that you've probably seen interactions with, like, and their frustrations, and maybe you've given them advice about how to?
It comes down to, well, I guess what I said at the very, very, very beginning today, and that's dialogue and making people understand your point of view and why it's important, or just getting them to understand where you're coming from. Of course, I mean, that's easier said than done, but it really is the only answer.
But is that a much of a qualitative or a quantitative thing in this day and age more than ever? Can you convince somebody this song is dope? Or is it more like you have to prove it with pie charts and numbers of Spotify and things?
Today, you have to, when you're talking about getting signed to a major label, you have to totally convince it with Spotify and pie charts and numbers.
Okay.
I've got acts that Universal, I've got a distribution deal with Universal, and I've got acts that I want to bring up through the machine. And it's just like, as soon as an act gets 900,000 streams on one song, they'll write a check.
Wow.
That's how it works. And until then, they ain't writing a check.
Wow.
Bless you.
Your question?
Excuse me. So, I'm an engineer by trade. Phil actually is my teacher for a couple semesters, so that's really cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I know him.
Yeah, that's your brother. But I don't want to be an engineer, so what advice would you have for people that have a strong background in something technical like engineering that kind of want to diversify their ventures and be more creative than just being an engineer? Because I would like to dabble in it, starting off, that's what I went to school for, but I don't want to stay there. Like, eventually I don't want to be an engineer.
Right. What is it you want to be?
I want to do a couple things. I want to direct music videos. I'm a DJ now, so that's kind of related. But I'm really leaning towards more visual arts. So I know that those worlds kind of overlap, but they're not, one and the same all the time. So
Why don't you want to be an engineer?
I mean, it's a long story, but like that, I had to pick that major, and I loved it. I enjoyed it while I was doing it. But I know that like the aspirations that I have don't really include being an engineer. So what, like, you did a bunch of things. You owned a record label, and those were things that were all like related. But what advice would you have for someone that's, started off as an engineer, but they're really trying to go elsewhere? Like, where would I start? Where would someone start?
I think you really first have to start and focus on what you want to be when you grow up. Seriously. I mean, what you have to pick a passion and then investigate. It's like you said, you're interested in movie or video production or being a video director or video whatever. And to me, the best way to get into doing that is to find somewhere where you can intern for free and learn from that experience. Couldn't get a job. Me and my brother couldn't get a job coming out of Temple University, so we interned up at a studio called the Power Station, where Tony Bon Jovi owned this, and we would sweep the floors and sleep on the floor and just So, but first, what do you feel you're really good at? It has to be something that, most people they have a sense as to what they're really good at. And then see where you can watch people doing it for free. Now, obviously, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to survive, but that's the best suggestion I could give.
I just want to make sure that we revisit Kyrie's secondary question, which I think applies to multiple people in this room, about representation and having those conversations with people who, if you don't have representation, if you have a very small team, if it's a team of just yourself, how can you start having those conversations and those dialogues? Obviously, connections is a big part of it, but how can you start that process?
I guess it really starts with reaching out to whatever the next level up from you is to try to get some response, to get some sort of dialogue with someone who can get you to the next level.
And what kind of people should you be looking for your team, so we can have those kinds of conversations? What should they be looking for in management or partners, collaborators?
I think it depends on what your passion is. If your passion is trying to become a video director, then it would be interning with someone in the video field. If you want to become an engineer, it would be interning at at a studio. I really can't think of any other way to get someone to, I mean, it's like, you want to get that person's attention and give you the time of day.
Let me ask you this question, maybe this will add a different branch to this, but what are some mistakes that people make when they're kind of approaching you? Younger people or even people who are older who kind of should know better. So what is a surefire way for you to just be like, yeah, I'm good?
Well, attitude, obviously, someone who's humble, someone who's willing to work, not afraid of work. Those are probably the most important elements. And you have a sense when you, it's like whether it's like, would you listen to my demo, or I want to help, with social media, and you have a conversation, and it's just like, well, have you, you get a sense as to, okay, oh wow, this person knows what they're talking about. Making yourself valuable to that person, so you want to bring them into your world.
So, I mean, I would assume, like what you're saying is, if someone was, you and myself, we can't really have the perspective of a 22-year-old, as much as we might like to and as much as we might try. So that's certainly one way to say, hey, like I understand the way that I consume things and the way my friends consume things. They could make themselves like helpful to you, like if you need to bounce things off like that. Like, for example, right? I mean, that's another way.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. And I guess that's what I mean in terms of being an intern, is
And-
they provide a valuable asset too, because again, I'm a 61-year-old whitehead from the suburbs.
Yeah.
Who understands some shit, but it's like some of this shit today, again, I'm just saying, because of my age, I'm like, I get yachty, okay, but,
You're one up on me.
I mean, I do. I mean, I get yachty, because you don't get yachty? No, man, really? All right, I feel good now.
Validation.
How about Young Lucy?
Yeah, Uzi, man.
Okay,
All right, we're in a good room here, man. I like that.
They do not matter.
Do we still have more time? Megan, do we have more time, or do you want us to cut? Should we keep going, or you want to cut it up?